Today we get to molest the all-new 2015 Lexus NX 200T F Sport. Now if that description doesn't already confuse you, this is Lexus's first entry into the compact, luxury, sporty SUV market. Let's have a look. So let's just have a look at it. The F Sport front end is... Now, if you don't like the spindle grille design to begin with, this is gonna be the most extreme and most hated version of it yet. This comes standard with LED headlamps, and actually it also has LED driving lights as well. Now your high beams are halogen still, which isn't a huge deal, but if you're on the fence about upgrading from this standard LED headlamp to the triple beam LEDs, these are really good. They're better than your standard HIDs, so if you want to save your money there, you can. Alongside this vehicle, again, they tried to have this really aggressive line that went along the whole side of it. The door handles are sculpted, the side view mirrors have this tasteful chrome along the side of it. It looks really good at certain angles. But again, a lot of this is just strange and awkward looking, because I know they were trying to make an aggressive SUV, but if you look at the initial design sketches, you don't have this monster wheel gap here. And I think that's what throws off the whole side of this vehicle. Now, clearly a lot of this is subjective, but this is one of my more favorite elements of the car, is how everything comes together in the back. From the taillight design to the overall look, it's just more subdued. It's less in your face. It just exudes kind of more luxury and a little bit of sport, well, at least for an SUV. So let me sum up the styling in the nicest way possible, because I know a lot of owners of this vehicle are attracted to it because there's nothing else that looks like it. But here's the thing. I think Toyota and Lexus were beat up for so long for being called boring, that they're too safe, they're appliances, and they took that and they went to the other extreme. And now it looks like they're just trying way too hard. What they're doing here is they're pulling a Madonna. It's like a 60-year-old trying to be an 18-year-old again, and it just doesn't work for me. How you doing today, Scott?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm real good, real good. What are we looking at?
A Lexus RAV4, or is it the NX, which I can't tell which one it is right now.
Lexus claims that this is 90% new, that it only shares certain components with the RAV4. When you look at the front end of this car, at least suspension-wise, it's a strut-based front suspension. There's nothing really fancy here. You got 2 piston calipers. You don't have any use of aluminum in the hub or knuckle. Your end links, I mean, everything here is just standard base.
Basic.
So clearly everything looks standard until you get to the turbo. From the turbo, your downpipe to your overpipe to the end exhaust, what's the diameter of the piping in the front?
2.75.
2.75, and then what does it go to here?
2.6, 2.4, 2.
So,
but it comes out 2-inch spouts, so that's 4 inches total.
So Scott's discovered this aero panel's kind of a special feature. What are we looking at?
It's got a cup holder built into it, so when you put your super sticky tires on, you flip this thing over, you can put your coffee in there while you wait for the tow truck.
Oh, that's a nice feature.
Mm-hmm.
Where was this designed?
Oh, it had to be at Fuji Raceway.
And when you come to the back, it's a little bit of a different story, because this is an all-new double wishbone suspension in the back, and it's more of a compact design, because having this compact, and you can look at the upper control arm here, it's lower and it mounts to the subframe, which means they can drop the floor of the SUV lower for more space and efficiency.
There's a lot of space in here, so.
Yeah, well, I don't know how much more space it really created, but so going into more detail, you can see just how compact everything was. And Scott was talking about the angle at which this damper is and the mounting point on the subframe up here, but you have everything's relatively in a confined space. Compared to some of the other cars we've looked at, and even the Lexuses, there's not a huge attempt to lower the weight here. It's mostly stamped steel, steel knuckles hubs, and like you pointed out, the only thing in the back is the differential cover that's aluminum. So that would also... The differential case is aluminum. So that would equate to its rather heavy weight at 3,900 pounds.
Oh, so tell me about the four-wheel drive on this thing.
This system is not full-time four-wheel drive like the Subaru, which is nice because you don't need full-time four-wheel drive. It's just a waste of efficiency, fuel economy, power. You don't need to be burning up power to the rear wheels, especially in a car like this. So what it does is it adjusts when you need torque to the rear all electronically. It uses yaw rate sensors, G-force sensors, wheel slip sensors to turn on the power up to 50% of the torque gets transferred to the rear. And the way that works is there's an electromagnetic coupling in the rear differential that locks under those conditions. So cruising along, it's 100% front wheel drive. So the other thing that this car has, which is kind of strange, and they actually put it in the CT Lexus, is it has a lateral damper.
Well, if it's in the CT, it should be in everything.
Well, probably, but I don't think that it is. I think they added it there first and then added this next. So it's a lateral damper that is, obviously it's not a strut bar because it's in the back here and up, which will kind of show you in the trunk or the whatever, the hatch.
Does it keep it from flexing?
Yeah, it's a lateral brace. It's kind of like a strut tower bar, but it's hydraulic. Turbowski was saying this is a girl's car because he looked at the VIN and it says JT Barb. So clearly, he doesn't know what he's talking about. What are you doing with that?
Of course I know what I'm talking about. I know superchargers, and this car's missing that.
Wait, it's already got a 2-liter turbo.
2-liter turbo needs a V6 supercharged minimum.
So you're gonna put that in here on top of that?
Yeah, look at that. Just go.
Bolts, right? It's a bolt-in? You don't have to cut anything or modify?
Just shut the hood. We can reroute the belt around.
Yeah, but then you can't run in the Atkinson cycle
We'll
anymore.
run in the auto cycle the whole time.
That's nonsense.
It'd be easy.
Oh, it's always easy.
Actually,
Actually,
I saw it on YouTube. It took them 15 minutes to do it.
there is a lot of technology into this 2-liter. And there's so much that I'm not going to cover it here, but some of the highlights are you have a twin-scroll turbo, and the way that this is tuned is it's tuned to be, well, in my opinion, it's tuned more like a naturally aspirated car. It builds up power to the red line. Yes, there's torque down low, but it's not instantaneous torque. It's more in the 3,000 RPM range. So when you're revving it out, you don't sense turbo lag. You don't sense a lot of the things that, your more fuel-efficient based turbochargers do. But this motor specifically, when they started development, they brought in the LFA V10 engineer. He was the drivetrain engineer for the LFA. So he was involved in this project. So what you've got here is a whole host of technology that they've thrown in here. One of the things they did is they don't use an air-to-air intercooler. They use a liquid-to-air intercooler, which doesn't heat soak as fast. And it improves back-to-back performance acceleration tests. And it gives you consistent feel. So I don't know why they put it in here first. Maybe it's because it was going to be a low production car, even though they don't plan on it being a low production car. But there's some stuff they did here that was cool. The turbo in this car was being developed in 2006 for a race series. The initial development of the NX started in 2009. So those engineers got together and they knew they wanted to have a different motor for this. So they pulled the turbocharging system from that race team and then they combined it with this new 2-liter. So the other thing that they've done here is you have VVTi on the exhaust side and you have VVTi-W on the intake side, which the W stands for wide. All that means is they can do more with valve overlap. So they can run this motor in the Atkinson cycle and the Otto cycle. So
That's mind-blowing.
it's going to be mind-blowing to repair.
Yes. They spent a lot of time on the intake tubes to make more power or less noise and only to add a sound generator.
Yeah, and that's the funny part because it's got a bypass valve for the turbo. and they felt like people would be offended by the bypass valve sound. So they put a chamber to capture the release of the bypass noise so you don't hear the bypass. So when you're driving this car, of course, it's a Lexus quiet, but you can't hear anything. It's so muted, it's almost boring. You got all this technology in here. You don't hear any intake induction. You don't hear any exhaust noise, but then you get the digital sound reproduction.
Digital noise.
I want to see what they're going to do with this. Obviously, I wouldn't want to deal with fixing it or working on it or doing anything to it, but this has potential.
I just leave it stock and maybe stance it.
You're going to stance this thing?
Mm-hmm. Can you imagine the wheels like that going down the road?
I'd chrome this grill out, all of it.
I would hand paint each one.
So now that you know what Lexus was trying to accomplish here with building a sporty compact SUV, it makes a lot of sense when you get behind the wheel of this car because it feels fitted. You feel like they've trickled down the technology from their sportier cars and even the LFA in some cases to a modern, everyday driving car. And it's so apparent in here from the feel of the steering wheel, the seats, the ergonomics. This is all a driver-centric experience. And there's an element of quality here. And that's one of the big things I like. There's attention to detail all over this. And you almost forget for a minute that you are driving an SUV. I have turned off traction control, which you have to do at a low speed or a stop to turn it all the way off, but you can't disable stability control. I'm in manual mode and sport mode. Let's see how this thing handles. Still cutting power. It's a little floaty. This is a really good turbo 4-cylinder, and typically I've had this aversion to turbocharged cars recently because the power is very, very unpredictable. You could be on the throttle, full throttle one time, and then you do it 10 other times, and you never really get the same power twice. In this car, there's a little bit of that, and it's not really turbo lag, it's just a strange inconsistency that you get with a lot of turbocharged cars. But one of the things I really like about the power delivery here is how it's linear, but it builds at the higher RPM, unlike the 2-liter turbo Sonata I was in, where all the power and the tuning was set to deliver power and torque at the low RPM, and once you wound it out, nothing felt, it didn't feel like anything was happening. Here you can drive it like a sports car, you get that power at the higher RPM, and it just feels really good. All right, let's take this car through some of the turns again and see how the handling is. Wants to understeer, of course. It's front-wheel drive primarily. Traction control's always cutting in. Stability control's always cutting in. The NX200T has a 6-speed automatic transmission, and it's just a typical torque-converted unit. So in eco and normal mode, it's just smooth. If you take manual control, it's not particularly quick to respond to downshifts. It's just what you want for daily driving. When you go into sport mode, the transmission sharpens up a bit. It's quicker to downshift, it's quicker to respond, but when you're not in manual mode using the paddles, it's just kind of a herky-jerky experience. I don't really particularly like the way that it behaves in sport mode unless you take manual control. The sound generator in this car is digital, and it's only activated in normal and sport mode, and there is a toggle volume switch here, so you can turn it all the way off, thank God. But let's just take a quick listen here and see what it sounds like. I said in my other video, I don't really have a problem with creating induction noise in the cabin, right? Especially if it's through a mechanical way with like a sound tube and you bring it in. But this, and like the F-150 I drove, they're getting to a point where they're creating digital engine noise through your speakers. This car is no different. And my problem with it is, it sounds very synthetic in this car. When you get to a higher RPM, it's not synced up with the motor, and it sounds like a glorified DSP effect where you turn on Hall or reverb. It gives you this strange sensation. I want to talk a little bit about ride quality here, and I'm not going to run this into the ground. And really with this F-Sport, I think it has an over-dampened ride. I've played with tire pressures. I can't seem to get a controlled ride on broken pavement, and it's one of the big downfalls of this vehicle for me, because this is not a sports car. This is not a performance car in any regard. Now, what Lexus tried to do here was to make a sporty driving SUV that emulates that of a sporty sedan or coupe. And this still is an SUV. You have a high ride height, there's a lot of wheel gap, there's a lot of suspension travel, so they try to compensate by making the dampers more firm, by increasing the spring rates. And on just driving around every day, if you're on smooth pavement, it's a really good experience. If you want to take corners, this is a good SUV to do that. The driving dynamics are really good. The issue is over choppy and broken pavement. It just does not feel good. It does not feel controlled, and you feel it throughout the whole body of the car. It transmits into the door panels, the plastics, and this is one of the first Lexuses that I've been in where you just kind of feel those rattles and creaks of, you know, a cheaper car. And this is not a cheap car, especially in this price range. All right, we're here to do this move. Looks like Turbowski's got the truck. So this is the couch. What are we gonna do with it?
Throw it off the balcony.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Where's it gonna land? Right here?
Down there.
Are you learning?
I did. It's
You
funny.
feel more enriched?
It's weird to get a history lesson from a U-Haul truck. I'm an overprivileged white man.
Yes.
So we've started a professional moving company. It's called AJ, and we're gonna be moving things real fast for you. Yeah, this is moving day. Ready? 3, 2, 1.
Oh no.
It's a nice necklace
Put it
holder.
on his back.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah.
Is that for your own personal collection?
That's when I go out to clubs.
Oh, you go. Okay, come on. Dude. Jesus. Can't just do it the old-fashioned way. Okay. So it holds like 4 drawers, a bag, a TV, a drone, some camera cases. There's the Samsung fluorescent backlit. And then the front seat, it's enough to fit my Hello Kitty doll, seat belted in, some toiletries, Dawn, and more camera stuff. That's about it. Oh, I'm sorry I didn't close the hatch. Oh, bro.
Dude, it's empty.
How does it feel?
One down. Who knows how many to go?
I mean, how do you feel getting deported?
Oh.
Back to Switzerland? Or Sweden? Wherever you're
Sweden.
Wah, wah.
from. You checked all the cabinets, all drawers?
You know, I keep coming back to these modern Lexuses and saying the same thing. These are some of the best interiors. And a huge part of this is because the people that work there clearly know how to put soft touch materials where they need to be, where you interact with things. So where my knees are placed, there's padding, there's soft touch leather. Where your elbows are resting, there's padded soft leather. And where you're not touching surfaces, they put all this great accent pieces in here. The center part of this dash was designed to give you this strong metal look structure. Now, of course, In the original design, it was actually metal. In the production version, you get this huge chunk of silver plastic, which really sucks, especially when you know what they originally intended, but this is the trade-offs made in production cars. The stitching on the dashboard. It's just the little touches here that take this from plain and boring to something actually comfortable and being a car that you want to get inside. Now, obviously, we can talk about materials all day, but the other thing is ergonomics. And in terms of Lexus, they do some of the best work. And I really don't understand why other manufacturers don't get some of this stuff. Take, for example, the HVAC controls. They're placed right in your line of sight. They're not buried by your knees or at your waist level. You can clearly see all the buttons here. And yes, there's plenty of buttons, but that's a good thing. It's not tied into the touchscreen where I have to use the touchscreen to adjust it. The other thing is it's at a weird angle, but the more you think about it and the more you use it, you realize that's exactly how your hand is going to go from the steering wheel to these buttons. You don't have to bend your wrist, it's right there. And it's this thought that they put in all over this cabin that makes Lexus stand out from a lot of brands, honestly. So whenever I get into a new car, the first thing I do is I put my sunglasses away in the storage container, which this car doesn't have. And I thought to myself, I'm like, how could they do all this and forget a sunglass holder? But then I realized there's this little hidden compartment down here, which I had put my iPass in, which is for toll roads. But it's actually for sunglasses. And then you lift up this little tab here, and you find this. It's like this removable little box. You flip it around, and it's a makeup mirror. And I think to myself, well, clearly this is for the female demographic, but it also makes it the first lipstick Lexus. So there's an option here, which is like $200 to add a wireless charger for your phone inside the armrest. And this is one of the first cars, if not the first, that's done that. And it's an excellent idea. Now, wireless charging or inductive charging has been around for a while. I think the HTC Thunderbolt was one of the first ones to add it. And now the S4 Samsung S5 had the ability, but you had to buy a separate back for it, and it made it thicker. But now the S6 has it actually built in. The S6 and the S6 Edge, which is really nice, but then you look at the shape of this charger, and of course, if you have a case on, it doesn't fit it perfectly in there, and it doesn't sit flush, and you need it to sit flush in order to charge correctly. So it's kind of like one of those, oh my God, that's a great idea, but poorly executed. Now you're running late to pick up Blake from the laundromat, and he comes out, he's like, man, that's a compact SUV. I don't know if I'm gonna fit in the back seats. Well, let me tell you, if you push these front seats all the way towards the rear, there's still plenty of legroom back there. Not only that, there's a nifty little handle on those back seats that help you to recline to get you in that position you like. Now, you drive past the Red Lobster, and he starts having a conniption fit because he wants Shrimply Tuesdays. There's plenty of room back there for him to have a complete spaz attack in comfort. One of the things I absolutely hate the most about this car, well, this is an option, is this power lift gate. It takes forever. It takes forever not only to put it up, but to put it down. And a lot of times it doesn't respond to the button press, and there's no way to manually override it. Now you can turn it off from the inside, but then you lose the power ability, and it's really hard to pull it up and push it down. It's just ridiculous. If you have the option to not have this, don't get it unless you never put anything in the back. In the US market, in the F-Sport, you can't get the Mark Levinson sound upgrade. But the good thing is, with the built-in system here, there's enough EQ settings to compensate for some of that, because you got good adjustment on your treble and mid, where you get some brightness out of the speakers. A lot of cars sound really flat. This is not one of them. Now, clearly, I try to consult with owners as much as possible, but one of the complaints that they had was these rear door weather stripping seals. I didn't run this in winter, but I can imagine if I did, how much salt would get caked in between, behind this rubber grommet. It's something that could potentially be an issue in terms of corrosion or rust too. So again, with the ergonomics, your right arm is totally comfortable. It's on a soft armrest. Even there's a palm rest for this RTI, or remote touchscreen interface, which is just a mouse pad. But the weird ergonomic problem I had here is when I go to adjust the volume, a lot of times I always turn this drive mode rotary knob that's right below it for eco, sport, and normal. I turn that instead of the volume knob because they're in such close proximity. So I saved the worst for last. The infotainment. Now I've been in 3 Lexus cars already. Did a review on the RX, and I could just tolerate the infotainment in that car. Then I got in the IS, which I couldn't tolerate because it was the same setup, but with a ton of lag. Then you get in here and you realize Lexus decided they were gonna fix all their problems and get rid of that little joystick control and substitute it for a mouse pad. Now, the thing is, it's not the controller, it's the software. This is the Windows 95 of infotainment in cars. And it's sad because you look at all the work and all the technical details they do with their interior, how advanced their engine design is, and you look at this and you're like, this is the best they can do? And people don't realize this, but when you get into other cars that have better infotainment, like the Genesis I just got out of, really, really high quality display, a physical control. The Mazdas have a physical control and a touch screen. These are companies that have either outsourced their design and development to like Johnson Controls. They've got it right. Lexus and Toyota do not have it right here, and this is a big area where they need some improvement. It's pretty clear I like this interior a lot. But the instrumentation on here, again, Lexus is superb at doing instrumentation. The F Sport Edition, you have an analog tach and speedometer with a digital center screen, and these analog gauges look beautiful. Really, they look great. This center LCD lets you cycle through a lot of different functions, menus in terms of tire pressure, fuel economy, your eco mode, your oil pressure gauge, your accelerometer, G-force gauge for the F Sport. It just all functions very well here. Now, I know you're waiting for me to talk about this analog clock, and how I'm gonna talk about it, because this plasticky little guy here does me one disservice, and that's that I can't put a digital clock in this digital gauge cluster, and I can't put a digital clock in this digital screen up here. So I have to look at this little plasticky guy. And that really frustrates me, because I feel like I'm back in my town and country that had a very similar clock, and my family's ragging on me to go to the Applebee's and go talk to the 5-star chef there and get a medium rare steak for everybody. I just don't want to do it. Just like I don't want to tell time off this analog clock. This is one of the most difficult times I've had coming up with a conclusion for a vehicle. And I think on paper, Lexus set out to create a sporty, fun to drive, different compact SUV. Well, mission accomplished. They did what they set out to do. But this F Sport Edition, for $45,000 as this one is, I don't get it. There's a lot of good going on here. Like the fact that it drives like a sporty car, from steering dynamics to handling. There's a little bit too much understeer for my liking, but it feels good to be behind the wheel. The interior is excellent. But then that's offset by things like having a ho-hum transmission, a really choppy ride over bad pavement. And then you have just the overall cargo capacity isn't that great. It's in between a Mazda 3 hatch and a CR-V or a RAV4 in terms of capacity. So why wouldn't you just go, take the money, and get a nice, sporty sedan? I don't know, that's my issue with it.